Chapter 21. How their cup brimmed full. Winter was always a bitter time at Kara, a time of much hardship and suffering to the ill-found and ill-fed prisoners, and to the members of the Free Command, a time of pinching struggle to make both ends meet. But it was also an opportunity for much self-sacrificing generosity and the sharing of little with those who had less. For the government allowance of 12 shillings a month did not go far when firing and lighting were added to the already heavy burden of food and clothing. And the means of outside increment, few at best, were almost eliminated by the absurd restrictions of the law. Of course, there were occasional remittances from home, some of which reached their destinations, and were valued at many times their intrinsic worth because of the remembrances they brought, but many of which never arrived at all and wasted themselves on objects very different from those intended by the senders. It was a time of mutual help all round, and if all outside was cold black and white, inside was much rosy cheer and much good fellowship when the members of the community met at this house or that to save fires and lights for the rest. But that winter was long remembered above all previous winters for the delightful hospitality of the Palma cottage. Serge Petrovich had always been helpful and free-handed. That winter his and his wife's generosity knew no bounds. The little house was open to all, and scarcely a night in the week but its windows gleamed like hospitable jewels, while all around was wintry desolation of ice and snow, and above a sky as grim as a curse. The glowing heart of the rough clay stove never once died out the winter through, and the hearts of its owners were warm to all the world. They were completely and absolutely happy. The brimming cup had reached their lips unspilled, and the deeper they drank of it, the more there was in it. It overflowed on all around and carried new strength to the weary and uplifting for all. And Anna Roskova especially rejoiced and took credit to herself, for she was convinced that it was her outspoken reasoning with Hope that had removed the unbelievable estrangement between these two. And when she nodded knowingly to her hostess and sometimes quietly rallied her on the subject, Hope would smilingly acknowledge what all the world could see, that she was as happy as the day and night were long. For a time, the police, as was their custom, used to intrude upon them now and again to see what mischief was afoot, but finding nothing but cheerful, unconspiring faces and much merry talk, and always the proffer of a cup of hot tea, their visits ceased. Not but that they would have liked to continue them for sake of the material benefits, for cheerful faces and merry talk were none too common at Kara. But though the sheep may perforce receive the sheepdogs with politeness, they can never mingle on friendly terms. Many a Cossack guard looked enviously at the glowing windows of the Palma house that winter, and wished himself a political prisoner so that he might be inside. Captain Sokolov maintained very friendly relations with them, and that was beneficial in many ways. It lightened the surveillance of his inferiors, and, since he insisted on Paul's acceptance of the official salary for his medical work, it placed them in a position of affluence compared with their neighbors, and their neighbors reaped the benefit. Sokolov never forgot that he owed his life to these two. More than once he hinted that he was working in their behalf, though he did not specify how, and he constantly and openly expressed to them his disgust at the neglect his communications suffered at the hands of his superiors at St. Petersburg. "Now, if I had my way," he said once, "I would have every official of the ministry serve a term in Siberia so that they should know how things really are. They would learn a great deal that it would do them good to know. They have their pleasures and their functions and their pressing matters close at hand, and Kara is very far away, and Kara can wait." Colonel Zazarin troubled them little. He was not their immediate official head, and only came in contact with them by a descent from his pedestal. They had shown him as plainly as they dared, when he did call upon them, that he was not wanted, and by degrees his visits fell off. Then, too, he had had a great scare with the typhus, and he still deemed it good for his health to keep aloof from prisons and prisoners, as much as he possibly could. So all through that winter the heart of the stove glowed warmly, and the samovar was always on the boil. And Hope Pavlova baked incessantly, and was busy and happy from morning till night, but happiest at night when her little house was packed like a biscuit box with less favored folk whose faces smiled at sight of her in spite of all their woes. So radiant was she then that they wondered at her new rich beauty and discussed among themselves what had come to her. And over their tea and cakes, to which some of them had been looking forward with keen anticipation all through the long, cold day, they talked and talked, these victims of great ideas, and very harmless victims, most of them, and sometimes they laughed, and sometimes even sang. A smaller sphere could hardly have been found, nor a narrower, nor a gloomier. But these two, by the wealth of love that was in their own hearts, and by the beauty of life that had come to them through their love, touched all these smaller lives with the gladness of hope and strengthened them for the sorrows they had to bear. It was in those long winter days and nights that Hope undertook to introduce her husband to the peculiarities and beauties of the English language, which she herself, as her mother's daughter, spoke with ease and fluency. He was an apt pupil and made rapid progress, and many a hearty laugh rose over their lessons and his first barbarous attempts at pronunciation. That was how, thanks to her stringent drilling, he came in later days to speak English like an educated Scotchman, an accomplishment which any man may be proud of, and which stood him in good stead when the time came. Yes, winter at Cara is a hard and bitter time at best, and for some a time of dull anguish and black despair. To such, as far as they could get at them, Hope and Pavloff became minor providences, where the major came like to be forgotten or abjured through utter hopelessness and misery. They cheered and comforted and fed starved souls and bodies alike, and shared to the full their own overflowing happiness with those who had none, and felt the richer for all they gave. Chapter 22. How the Cup Spilled. So the winter waxed and waned, and the skies began to brighten to the spring. The snows disappeared except on the hills. The roads were knee-deep tracts of mud, and Colonel Zazarin, having escaped the typhus, was down with typhoid and was a very sick man. Pavloff prevailed on Hope and Madame Roskova to take charge of him, since nothing but the most careful nursing could save his life. They both detested the man, Hope for sufficient reason, and Anna by instinct, but neither was the woman to leave even an enemy in extremity. Pavloff had labored mightily all through the winter on such necessary sanitary improvements as might check, to some extent, the recurrence of the fever when the warmer weather came. And Sokolov, in the light of the previous year's experiences, did what he could to help him. He could give him free labor to any extent almost, but had received neither money nor encouragement from headquarters in answer to his applications. And so Pavlov's improvements must necessarily be of a homely character. But they were such crying evils that he had to fight. The appeal they made to the senses was so vital that a blind man could have discovered them and known by his nose what needed to be done. It was a busy, happy time for him, and he asked no more for himself than that the authorities at St. Petersburg should continue their neglect of Kara and leave him in possession of the field. But one afternoon, there came rattling up from Ostkara a strange lieutenant of gendarmes, attended by 2 armed orderlies, and evidently in a hurry. He inquired for Captain Sokolov's quarters and descended from his telega there with an air of relief and much stretching of the legs. A quarter of an hour later, Sokolov's orderly was hunting through the settlement for Serge Palma, with instructions to attend him to his own house. Thither came to him presently Captain Sokolov himself, in great perturbation of mind. Paul, in fact, had never seen the hard face so moved. "Palma," said the captain, "I bring you ill news. I tried to do you a kindness, and this is the result. They have sent orders to move you on to Yakutsk. It is damnable. I told them of all your good work here, and this is their answer." And he delivered himself volcanically of his feelings on the matter, while Paul braced up under the blow. "When?" was all that he asked at last. "At once. I'm to deliver you to this man, and his instructions are to carry you without delay to Yakutsk." And the hard face was all twisted between indignation and pity. "What must be, must," said Paul philosophically. "The governor will probably die, but I suppose we can't help that. What about my wife? Is it province or town? Province. It is an awful life for a woman. But she has the right to go with you if she will. I shall do all I can to get the order reversed. Perhaps Madame would wait. I will see her at once. Can we have till tomorrow morning? I will arrange that. It is damnable. Let me know if Madame decides to go, and I will procure her conveyance. There is Zazarin's tarantas. He will probably never need it again. Oh, it is damnable. And Sokolov cursed his way back to his own quarters, while Pavloff sat with his head in his hands and tried to look this last blow of fate squarely in the face. For life among the outer barbarians of the Yakut Ulises, ignorant even of the most elementary decencies of life, cut off absolutely from civilization, is life at its very lowest and its very worst. How could he ask Hope to accompany him to such a place? How dissuade her from going? Nay, he knew beforehand that she would go. And sitting there in utterest misery, he forecasted the marring and degrading of her bright young life and the breaking of their newborn happiness. But there was little time for sitting still. Hope must be told, and at once, and he went off heavily to Colonel Zazarin's house. He paid a somewhat perfunctory visit to his patient and beckoned Hope out of the room. She had seen the trouble in his face and followed him anxiously. "What is it?" she asked with a hand on his arm. "Bad news, dearest. The worst possible news." At the moment he could conceive no worse. "A special messenger has arrived from St. Petersburg. I'm ordered to Yakutsk." "Yakutsk," she gasped, for she knew all that it implied. "Sokolov is beside himself. He has been endeavoring to better our condition. He looks on this as their answer. It is grievous treatment, but there is nothing for it but to submit. But Hope, it is possible it may be only for a time. Sokolov, I know, will do his utmost in the matter. For yourself, dearest." "Where you go, I go," she broke in hastily. "But Hope, Yakutsk." I know, but we will not be separated." "God help us," he said. "I dare not think of you there." "And I dare not think of myself anywhere but there, Paul. No, we will go together. When is it?" "Tomorrow." "Tomorrow? Then we have no time to lose. I will go at once and get things ready. And I must go and tell Sokolov that you decide to go." Chapter 23. How one came back from the dead. Captain Sokolov's orderly never for one moment thought of standing on ceremony with the doctor, who was in and out of the very prison all day long. He showed him at once to the room where the captain was entertaining his guest. Pavloff crossed the threshold and stood numb and dazed. His eyes blinked at the newcomer in a stare of petrified horror. Then they wrenched themselves away and fixed hypnotically on Sokolov, who gazed back at him with pity. Sokolov thought he understood. He knew what Yakutsk meant. He knew that few survived it, and that most would prefer death to trying it, and that for a woman it was impossible. "She will not go," said the captain commiseratingly. "And yet, I don't know but what she is right. It is no place for a woman, and perhaps she will change her mind." But Pavlov did not speak, did nothing but stare at him as if he were a ghost. "Take heart, Palma," he growled in the nearest approach to kindliness which 20 years in the gendarmerie had left him. "Take heart. I will not rest till this matter is righted. It is too damnable. There is some mistake. This is Lieutenant Vinsky, who brings the bad news." But there was more here than Captain Sokolov remotely dreamed of. Paul had put up his hand to the doorpost for support. His head was spinning. The two men at the table and the lights in the room began to swim slowly round and round. The doorpost began to reel on its own account and tried to slip out of his fingers. For the man who sat there hobnobbing with Sokolov, trim, official, booted and belted, perfectly satisfied with himself and his surroundings, was Serge Palma in the flesh, and his bold blue eye had winked encouragingly and admonishingly at Paul the moment he entered the room. "Vodka," said Sokolov, and sprang up and slid a chair under Pavloff and hastened to bring him brandy in a glass. It has been too much for him. Damn those, for it is not always wise to express one's feelings concerning one's superiors, even though the grounds be ample. I am with you, Captain, said Palma heartily. Petersburg lacks heart, and the Ministry of the Interior is destitute of the most elementary bowels of compassion. If they had to carry out their own instructions, they would learn many things they are ignorant of. It is true, growled Sokolov, but said no more. Even people who agreed with you in their hearts sometimes made the most of one's indiscretions and reported them behind one's back to one's undoing. So, Mr. Palma, said Serge the instant he saw Paul pulling himself together, Madame is not inclined for Yakutsk. Paul shook his head vaguely, without looking at him. His brain was in a tangle, but slowly and confusedly it was beginning to work again, and to piece things together. It is truly a terrible place for any civilized being to go to, said Serge, and one cannot be surprised at Madame's hesitation. It is natural, but after all, a wife's place is by her husband's side. Perhaps, as Captain Sokolov says, she may change her mind before morning. It would be better for her to change it now than when we are gone. It is a bad journey at best, but we would do all in our power to smooth it for her. I think you should talk with her again on the subject, Mr. Palma. Yes, nodded Pavloff, understanding dimly what was expected of him. I will talk with her again. And what, in heaven's name, are we to do here without you? Said Sokolov. You must get out a doctor before the summer comes, said Paul dully. Da, must, that is all very well, but we are dependent on those. Fools, suggested Serge heartily. Well, those gentlemen who sit in comfort in St. Petersburg, and whose thoughts don't carry as far as Kara. I will go, said Paul, getting up. I will go and speak with her again. And he went out, feeling like one who has fallen on his head and is going home to tell of the accident. The thought of Yakutsk was horrifying to Hope, but Paul would be with her, and that would make up for much. He had made Kara a heaven for her. Well, they would carry their heaven with them wherever they went, aye, even to Yakutsk. And perhaps it might be only for a time, and then they would be allowed to come back to Kara. What happiness the rough little house had held for them. She would have liked to take that chair with her, that chair at which they had knelt the other night. Perhaps Captain Sokolov would let her have it. She would get Paul to ask him. It was hard to decide what else to take and what to leave, for if they took everything they had, they would still be bare at Yakutsk, and in a 1,000-mile journey by Telega, there was little room for superfluous baggage. Still, she would have that chair, whatever she had to leave behind. She flitted busily to and fro, arranging and folding and tying into bundles. She would put a bold face on matters and bear herself bravely, for she knew his fears were all for her. She would show him that he need not fear. The only thing on earth she feared was losing him. Side by side with him she could stand anything, even Yakutsk. With such thoughts working in her, the face she turned on Pavloff when he opened the door was to him as the face of an angel. So high a courage, so much of tenderness, so much of love were in it. He never forgot it. Paul, my dear, she began, and broke off short at sight of his ghastly face. Oh, what is it? She cried, in new distress and terror, as he sank heavily on a seat. Listen, Hope, he said quietly, but his voice was as strained and unnatural as his face. I have other news for you. Terrible news. Ah! She jumped to it with womanly instinct. He knew it by the sudden pallor of her face. Serge is alive and well? My God! She gasped, and her hands fluttered gropingly, as though they sought something tangible to hold on to. He is here, Hope. And he caught the wandering hands and held them. Here? Oh, Paul. Paul! And her hands gripped his convulsively, and the sudden tumult of her heart fined her voice to a terrified whisper. Dearest, he said, we did what seemed right, and our hearts are clean. A higher than Serge must judge us. It was the right note, and it quieted her. But they sat long in silence and gazed desperately into the future, and it was full of shadows. We must be very cautious, Hope, for his sake, he said at last. His life hangs by a thread, a word, a sign, and he is lost. It is he who has brought the order to transport me to Yakutsk. Serge, Paul, what are you saying? And she gazed at him with a new fear in her eyes. No, he said with a rough, quick shake of the head. I am not crazy. It is as I tell you. He has come here at risk of his life to get me out of the toils. The order he brings is doubtless forged. The uniform he wears without a right. It is bravely done. He tried his best to instill life and warmth into his words, but they would not come to his bidding. They were only words. But, she said dazedly, Yakutsk? Do you not see? That is only a blind like all the rest. Once clear of Kara, we go where we will. You have spoken with him? Only before Captain Sokolov. But I understand it all. Serge is Lieutenant Vinsky. I went to tell Sokolov that you would go with me. Oh, Paul. How can we go? She gasped. We must hope. There is nothing else to be done. Serge's life is at stake. Oh, why? Why did he not come sooner, if he had to come? It is terrible, his coming now. Yes, it is terrible, his coming now. It is God's will, dearest, and our hearts are void of offense. We must think now of Serge. It will try you hard in the morning, Hope. I will be careful, she said, eyeing him breathlessly still, with wide, amazed eyes. But you will come too, Paul? We all go together? I must go. It is for me he came. Does he not know I am here? She gasped. I cannot tell what he knows. But yes, he must understand. He knows I am Serge Palma here. He knows Madame Palma is here. He must have reasoned it all out. Yes, I remember. It was he who suggested that Madame might change her mind. Change her mind? And decide to go. Captain Sokolov did not believe you would face it. He never had a wife. I must try to speak with Serge, he said. I must tell him. It will be terrible. Tell him how we waited, Paul. How we waited and hoped and despaired, and how we heard twice of his death. I will tell him all. It will be sore telling, Hope, and sore hearing. Our hearts are clean, Paul. God bless you, dearest, and forgive me for bringing this trouble on you. Not so, she said quickly. I share the blame, if blame there is. Have I not shared the joy of it? God keep you, my dear heart. And he kissed her very lovingly and went out. And she sat, looking into the future, the near and the far, with woeful eyes and tightened lips. He went straight to Sokolov's quarters, ostensibly to tell him that his wife would go on the morrow, but determined, if he could, to get speech alone with Serge. And so he became witness of a curious scene between the captain and the pseudo-lieutenant, a scene which, in very different ways, was highly creditable to both. It bore eloquent testimony to Captain Sokolov's good feeling. It spoke worlds for Palma's self-command. The captain and his visitor had got on exceedingly well together, since the latter endorsed to the full the former's exasperation at the treatment Kara received from St. Petersburg. No matter what the immediate subject of discussion, Sokolov would constantly break out in bitter recurrence to his grievance. When Paul was shown in to them, the matter of his translation was uppermost again, and in a very acute form. Ha, Doctor, we were speaking of you, said Sokolov. I want Lieutenant Vinsky to allow you one day more, while I telegraph to headquarters and beg them to reconsider the matter. It is out of all reason. They cannot surely have received my letters, or they have not read them. It is inhuman. It is brutal. I am indebted to you, Captain. Paul made shift to answer, as all the disastrous possibilities of such a course crowded his brain. You have done all you could for me. I would never forgive myself if you did yourself any disservice by trying to help me further. Exactly, said Palma quietly. That is the danger. He pursed his lips and shook his head dubiously. Do you know why Simonovsky was removed from Barnaul, Captain Sokolov? I can imagine from the way you put it, said Sokolov, blowing out smoke viciously. Exactly, for alleged favoring of politicals. He has had no post since. I don't care, Kopek, said Sokolov stubbornly. This is no ordinary case. Besides, we need him here to keep down the fever. That is reason enough. It is not for me to advise, Captain, said Palma with another dubious shake. You know who you are dealing with. Telegraph by all means, if you are willing to take the risk. As for me, I have only one thing to do, and that is to carry out my instructions to the letter, much as I may regret them. With a bow to Paul. I have strained them somewhat, perhaps already, but well, we could hardly have started tonight. And besides, the unexpected question as to Madame arose. How is that matter decided, Mr. Palma? Madame decides to go, said Paul. Bravo, said the lieutenant. I thought she would. Can't you procure a tarantus for her, Captain? Just for the first stage or two? We shall strike the snow in the Yablanois, and then it will be smooth going. But Telega traveling is the very devil, especially for a woman. My bones are aching yet. Zazarin has a tarantus, said Sokolov. He won't need it for some time to come, said Paul. If he ever needs it, said Sokolov. All the same, I shall telegraph at once. Let them think and do what they please. Help me, Vinsky, to word it so that they will understand the blockheads, suggested Palma with a smile. I will help you with pleasure, Captain. Only you understand, answer or no answer. I start at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning for Yakutsk. What is the soonest you can get their reply? If they answered at once, we might hear during the night. It all depends on things at the other end. The minister might be away, and no one else would take the responsibility. But I will have an orderly waiting at this end, so as to lose no time. Well, I can do this for you, said Palma. We will travel easily and make no undue speed. If you receive a favorable reply after we have left, a messenger can catch us. For your sake, Mr. Palma, and for Madame's, we will hope it may be so. That will do, said Sokolov. Now, the telegram. He hunted up an official form and began to write. To the Minister of the Interior, concerning political prisoner Palma ordered to Yakutsk. Typhus raging here. That's straining a point, but it probably will be soon. Palma's services as doctor urgently needed. Say that the governor's at the point of death, suggested Palma. Good, that is stronger still. And he wrote in the addition and continued, thinking it out word by word. Beg your permission, retain prisoner here for present. See my letters. At which the lieutenant laughed out loud. My dear Captain, he said, those last words would lose you both your place and your request. His Excellency is not accustomed to be addressed in so terse a fashion as that. His reply would probably be, tell Captain Sokolov to go to the devil or to Yakutsk, which is pretty much the same thing. Level it up to his altitude, my dear sir, or worse will come of it. It might do for the office, but it won't do for the big man himself. It does read a bit brusque, said Sokolov, looking at the objectionable words. What do you suggest? You can't make it too flowery. I would suggest, crave your Excellency's gracious perusal of my letters concerning this prisoner. When would your letters reach them, Captain? Weeks ago, months ago, before you left, certainly. Of course I forgot. It is to those letters that you attribute their present action and my presence here. Yes, said Sokolov, looking sober. I was forgetting that. Is it wise to refer to the letters at all, think you? Why not base your request solely on the ground of the typhus? Sokolov considered the point, tapping the pencil up and down between his teeth. That is, continued Palma, if you are quite decided on sending the telegram at all. It is doubtful if any good will come of it, and as far as you yourself are concerned, it would undoubtedly be safer not to interfere. It shall go, said Sokolov obstinately. They may break me if they like, but Palma saved my life, and I do not forget. He finished the telegram and gave it to his orderly to dispatch at once, bidding him at the same time station a messenger at the office to bring him the answer without delay at whatever hour it might arrive. Pavloff marveled at Palma's careless ease in face of so imminent a danger. For if Sokolov's telegram passed quickly through from point to point and reached the minister's hands and was deemed worthy of prompt attention, discovery was unavoidable, and the results to Serge himself must be disastrous. But he sat there smoking as coolly as if he had not a care in the world, and Paul came to believe that the forethought which had devised so bold a scheme must have provided also for such a contingency as this. But Palma's calmness was simply the courage of a brave man who had calculated the chances in his favor. He had done all he could to improve them by delaying the telegram. Now he awaited the result with at all events outward equanimity. It was then 10 o'clock at night, taking into account the difference of time between Kara and St. Petersburg, it would probably be 5 or 6 in the evening before the telegram reached its destination. The chances were that the minister would not be at his office. One chance to the good. Again, the chances were that the telegram would take considerably longer in transmission from station to station over those 4,000 miles of desert. Another chance to the good. Even if it got to the minister that night, it was incredible that he should remember who Serge Palma was, without inquiry and the turning up of dossiers, all of which meant time and trouble. And why should the great man worry himself unduly over so very small an affair as the sending, or not sending, of a poor devil of a political to Yakutsk? Several chances to the good there. If they troubled to investigate at all, they would discover that some mistake had been made by someone. But mistakes, and very terrible mistakes, were constantly being made. If Serge Palma had been ordered to Yakutsk by someone naturally must have had very good reason for so doing. Serge Palma would be as safe at Yakutsk as at Kara, and it is an awkward thing to interfere with accomplished facts without very good grounds for doing so. A galaxy of chances to the good in all that. And Serge's mind had flashed over them as the smoke curled lazily through his mustache, and he felt fairly safe. And so he sipped his vodka as quietly as if he had been in a Petersburg cafe without a care on his mind. Pavloff's mind had been so jangled by the day's happenings that it was not working as sharply and clearly as usual. He would not have been in the least surprised if the orderly had walked in at any moment with a telegram from headquarters, exploding the mine on which they sat. If he could have spoken privately to Serge, he would have urged him to leave them to their fate and flee while yet there was time. But he had no chance of speaking, since Sokolov never left his guest, and finding the atmosphere too electrical for his tight-strung nerves, he begged the captain's permission to retire, on the plea of packing his belongings for the journey. "At 8 o'clock we start, Mr. Palma," said Serge. "I will be here." And Madame. "Unless she changes her mind again," said Sokolov. "It is about the only privilege we can offer her here, and God knows, no one would blame her if she did." "She will not change her mind," said Pavloff, and withdrew, and went wearily home again. He felt utterly fagged out, body and soul, with the rending emotions of the day, and he knew there was no rest for him that night. Time enough to rest when he got to Yakutsk. From all accounts, it was the only thing to be done there. Bah, he was forgetting. His brain was getting muddled with it all. It was not to Yakutsk they were going. He wondered vaguely where Palma would make for. The Amur probably, and Vladivostok. But he would have it all arranged, and God grant them a good deliverance. For when they got clear of Kara, their troubles would only be beginning. It was a desperate venture at best, but they must go through with it and trust in Providence. He felt, however, more like a prisoner bound for Yakutsk than a prisoner on the eve of enlargement, more of a bondman than he had ever felt since he came to Kara. Chapter 24. How they prepared to go with him. Hope had been busy during his absence. Maria Verskaya had come in, and between them they had packed Hope's belongings into bundles and spread out all Paul's for his decision as to what he would take and what leave behind. The kind-hearted little chatterbox was loud in her lamentations over their sudden departure, and her ceaseless flow of talk was to Paul like the continuous dropping of small shot on a bared membrane of the brain. He hastily selected the most necessary things, constantly forgetting that it was not to Yakutsk that he was going, but to freedom, where all things were obtainable, or to death, where nothing would be needed. The philosophical paucity of his requirements astonished Maria Verskaya not a little. "But Serge Petrovitch," she would urge time after time, "you will certainly need this at Yakutsk. There is nothing there, you know, absolutely nothing. You cannot possibly replace it." No, I shall not need it. I will do without it, Marya Stepanovna." And his brain has given way, Marya would plaintively murmur. You will give that to Polakov, and this to Hugo Svent, and this to Alexei Itelsky. I shall not require them, I assure you," as she held up remonstrative hands again. "Anna Roskova will do as she thinks fit with all the rest. Now I will see you home, or the police will think you have run away." For he knew that Hope's nerves must be as tremulous as his own, and that Maria's chatter must be jangling them in similar fashion. Hope was still busy about the house on quite unnecessary work when he got back. She could not sit still for a moment. Her great eyes glowed luminously in their dark circles, in spite of their drooping lids. She turned them on him full of anxious questioning as he came in. He shook his head despondently. "I had no chance of speaking to him. Sokolov never left us for a moment." But he said nothing of that fateful telegram. The load she carried was heavy enough already. Her strained, white face wrung his heart. If the sacrifice of his own life could have smoothed her way, he would have given it, willingly and instantly. But he knew that it could not. It was to him that she looked now, and he must live for her, to defend her against the whole world, as he had pledged himself when he married her. "Maria was driving me crazy with her babble," Hope said wearily, "but I could not get her to go. You are quite sure it is Serge, Paul?" "Quite sure, Hope." "Has he suffered much?" "He looks gay and gallant, though I have no doubt he is as anxious as we are. It is surely a very dangerous thing he is doing. He is risking life and liberty, but he is a brave man. We must do nothing to add to his risk." "I will be very careful." "Will you not try to sleep for an hour or two, Hope? There will be no rest when once we start." "Sleep? I could as soon think of dying as of sleeping. Which way do we go?" "Up into the Yablonnois. Then, as Serge may have decided, he has thought out his plans, without doubt." "I will get ready the breakfast," she said, starting up again. "It is only 12 o'clock yet," he said with a wan smile. "Well, some tea then. One must do something. Will you not try to sleep? You look worn out." "I could not sleep either. We will have some tea." So they sat sipping their tea and making pretense to eat, and Hope jumped up every second minute to do some little job which did not need doing, and Pavloff's teeth ground silently at times as he thought of that telegram speeding over the steppes and the possible reply speeding back for their destruction. But he said no word of it to Hope, and when he had got his pipe fairly under way and the soothing of the tea began to make itself felt, his wits settled down somewhat, and matters began to look more hopeful, as they sometimes have a way of doing when they have touched bottom. He reproached himself as an ingrate for the feelings that would come uppermost in his heart. He tried his very hardest to feel grateful to Serge for his gallant remembrance of him. But he was painfully conscious of a dull sense of regret, of injury almost, at his having come back to life, and in so lively a fashion. Far better if he had left them alone. But then he could not know that. He had gallantly done his best, and in return they were going to break his heart. How would he take it? Hardly, hardly. How could it be otherwise? If only he could have had it all out with Serge before he and Hope met in the morning. But that had been impossible. And it would be hard for Hope, too. The sight of Serge's misery would be dreadful to her. The thought of it would darken her life. But there was no escape from the coil. Explanations were impossible. Go they must, for Serge's life was at stake. But the thought of the explanations which must be made on the morrow hung upon him like a great black cloud. Liberty was good, but the love and companionship of Hope Ivanovna were more to him than anything liberty could give him. With her he would have been content to spend the rest of his life at Kara. Content? Aye, happy beyond anything all the rest of the world could possibly hold for him. And now their happy content must suffer shock and be strained through bitterness. It would survive the shock, or if they themselves survived the dangers of the road they were about to travel, but it would always bear the imprint of it. And not without bitterness, he recognized all the irony of the position. How Serge was repaying him in kind, and most exactly for the service he had once rendered him. For Hope Ivanovna's sake, he had undertaken Palma's burden, and so, all unconsciously, had been the means of separating her and Serge. And now Palma had come, at risk of his life, to set him free, and all unconsciously was threatening the new happiness which had come to Hope and himself. It was a strange turn of the wheel, and there was no escape from it. He strove to be grateful, but found it well nigh impossible.